My name is Claire Brooks. I'm 32 years old, and the moment I found out my parents had given my inheritance to my younger sister, I was standing in my grandmother's kitchen holding a chipped blue mug that still smelled like her peppermint tea. My mother didn't even sound guilty when she said it. She said it the same way someone might say the weather had changed. Calm, final, as if my life had not just been quietly rearranged without my consent. What she didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that Grandma hadn't lost control of anything. Not the money, not the house, and definitely not the truth. Before I take you back to how this all unfolded, pause for a second. If you've ever been blindsided by family, especially by the people who were supposed to protect you, I want you to stay with me. And if stories like this resonate with you, subscribe, like, and share. These stories don't just entertain, they remind us we're not alone. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because Tuesdays were the days Grandma used to bake bread, and even after she passed, my body still reacted to that memory. My phone buzzed while I was folding laundry in my apartment, the small one-bedroom I'd moved into after my divorce. Mom flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Something in my chest tightened before I even said hello. "Claire," she said, skipping the greeting, "we need to talk about the inheritance." I leaned against the counter, already tired. "What about it?" There was a pause, just long enough to feel rehearsed. "We've decided to give your portion to your sister. Emily needs it more." That was it. No explanation, no apology, just a decision they'd made without me about something that had been promised to me since I was a child. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at the wall, watching a crack in the paint trace its way down like a slow tear. "You're joking," I finally said. "I'm not," my father's voice cut in, suddenly on speaker. "Emily has children. You don't. This is about fairness." Fairness. That word hit me harder than anything else, because fairness had never existed in our house. Not really. Growing up, Emily had been the sun, and the rest of us revolved around her. She was 2 years younger, louder, prettier in the way people noticed. Teachers adored her. Relatives bragged about her. When she cried, the world stopped. When I cried, I was told to be strong. Grandma noticed, though. She always did. Her house was my refuge, a modest 2-story place in a quiet neighborhood full of old furniture and memories that felt safe. While my parents were busy praising Emily's latest achievement, Grandma would sit beside me, squeeze my hand, and ask how I was really doing. She taught me how to listen, how to observe, how to wait. "People show you who they are when they think you're powerless," she once told me while we shelled peas at the kitchen table. Never forget that. At the time, I didn't understand why she said it with such weight. After my divorce at 29, when I came home feeling like a failure, it was Grandma who welcomed me without questions. She let me cry in her guest room. She didn't rush me to heal. She didn't compare me to Emily, who by then was married with 2 kids and a husband my parents adored. Grandma just listened. When she passed away last year, it felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. At the reading of the will, my parents sat stiffly, Emily dabbing at dry eyes. I remember noticing how Grandma's lawyer spoke carefully, choosing words like stones placed in a river. The will was structured, he said. Certain assets would be handled privately. At the time, I was too deep in grief to question it, until that phone call. I drove to my parents' house that same evening. The place looked exactly the same as it had my entire life. White siding, perfect lawn, a house that looked warm from the outside, but always felt cold once you stepped in. Emily's car was already there. She was sitting at the dining table when I walked in, scrolling on her phone like nothing had happened. When she looked up, she smiled. Not surprised, not guilty, just satisfied. "Hey, Claire," she said, managing a frown. "Mom told you? So it's true, you're taking my inheritance." Emily sighed dramatically. "It's not like that. Grandma would have wanted it this way." I laughed, a short, broken sound. "You didn't even visit her." My mother snapped. "That's enough." I looked at her then, really looked at her. The woman who taught me to tie my shoes, who'd hugged me when I scraped my knees, now couldn't even meet my eyes. "You promised," I said quietly. "You all promised." My father folded his arms. Promises change, circumstances change. What changed, besides Emily wanting more? Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. Emily stood up, walked past me, and brushed my shoulder as if I were furniture. "You'll be fine," she said softly. "You always land on your feet." That was the moment I realized something important. They weren't worried about me because they never had been worried about me. I was the backup plan, the strong one, the one who didn't need help. I left without saying goodbye. That night, I drove straight to Grandma's house. It hadn't been sold yet. My parents said they were handling the paperwork. I still had a key. When I unlocked the door, the familiar smell wrapped around me like an old blanket. Dust, lavender, home. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Grandma used to hum while cooking, and let myself break. I cried until my chest hurt, until my head ached, until I had nothing left. That's when I noticed the envelope. It was tucked beneath the fruit bowl, yellowed with age, but indefinitely intentional. My name was written on it in Grandma's handwriting. Claire. My heart started to race. With trembling fingers, I slid it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small key taped to it. The paper began with 4 words that made my breath catch. "If you're reading this." I didn't know it yet, but whatever was written on that page was about to change everything my parents thought they controlled. And as I unfolded the letter, I realized Grandma hadn't just been watching, she'd been planning. And she had trusted me with the truth. But before I could finish reading, headlights flashed through the kitchen window, a car pulled into the driveway. Someone else had a key too, and they were coming inside. The headlights washed across the kitchen walls like an interrogation lamp. I froze, the letter half unfolded in my hands, the small key cold against my thumb. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure whoever was outside could hear it. For a brief, irrational second, I thought about hiding, like a child who still believed that if you couldn't be seen, you couldn't be hurt. The front door handle turned. I stood up slowly, folding the letter and slipping it into my pocket just as the door creaked open. The familiar sound, once comforting, now felt like a warning bell. "Claire?" My mother's voice called out. "Are you here?" Of course she knew. She always knew where to find me when it suited her. "I'm in the kitchen," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She stepped inside, followed by my father. They looked startled, like they hadn't expected to actually confront me. My mother's eyes flicked to the table, then to my hands, as if she were searching for something. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "This house isn't yours anymore." I almost laughed. Almost. Grandma gave me a key. My father frowned. "We're handling the estate now." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope. My mother's breath hitched when she saw Grandma's handwriting. "What's that?" she asked too quickly. "You tell me. You've already decided everything else without me." They exchanged a look, one I'd seen my whole life. Silent communication, strategy, control. My mother stepped closer. "Claire, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I met her eyes. I learned from the best. Before either of them could respond, I turned back to the letter. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to read. "If you're reading this, it means they've done exactly what I warned you they would." My chest tightened. "Claire, I love you for your quiet strength, but strength doesn't mean silence. I have seen how you've been overlooked, how your kindness has been mistaken for weakness. I did not raise you to be invisible." I swallowed hard. My father shifted uncomfortably. "You don't need to read that." "Oh, I do," I said. I continued. "They will tell you they are being fair. They will tell you this is about need or children or circumstances. It is about control, and I did not give them control." My mother's face drained of color. "What did you do?" she whispered. I kept reading. The house is not part of the inheritance they think they're distributing. Neither is the account. I placed everything in a trust. You are the beneficiary. The key I've left you opens the safe in my bedroom closet. Inside are the documents. The room felt like it tilted. My father's voice rose. That's impossible. Grandma's words continued, steady and calm, just like her voice had always been. I chose you because you listen, because you see, because you will do what is right, not what is easy. I am still in control, Claire, and now so are you. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Emily's voice broke it. "What's going on?" she said from the doorway. She stood there, arms crossed, eyes darting between us. When she saw the letter, her expression hardened. "You went behind our backs," she accused, not even pretending the question was for Grandma. My mother turned on me. "Give me that letter." I folded it carefully and slipped it back into my pocket. "No." My father's face darkened. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly. You gave away something that was never yours to give." Emily scoffed. "This is ridiculous. Grandma wouldn't—" "She did," I said, meeting her gaze, "because she saw you, all of you." The accusation hung in the air. "We'll get a lawyer," my father said sharply. "This won't stand." I smiled then, small but certain. She already did. I turned and walked past them, up the stairs, my legs shaking with every step. Grandma's bedroom door was exactly where it had always been. Inside the closet, behind a stack of old coats, was the safe. The key slid in smoothly, like it had been waiting for me. Inside were folders, documents, proof. Downstairs, voices rose. Panic replaced certainty. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one scrambling to keep the peace. I came back down holding the folder. "This changes everything," my mother said, her voice thin. "No," I replied. "It just reveals it." Emily stared at me like a stranger. "You're really going to do this?" I thought of every time I'd been told to be patient, to be understanding, to accept less. "Yes," I said, "I am." I walked out of the house without looking back, the night air cool against my face, my heart pounding with something new. Not fear, not grief, power. But as I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You have no idea what you just started." I stared at the screen, my pulse racing, because somehow I knew this wasn't over. The message stayed on my screen long after the phone went dark. "You have no idea what you just started." I sat in my car outside Grandma's house, hands gripping the steering wheel, the engine still off. The porch light glowed softly behind me, like the house itself was watching, waiting to see what I'd do next. For a few seconds, fear tried to creep back in. Old fear. The kind that told me to apologize, to smooth things over, to make myself small again. But something had shifted. I didn't reply. I drove home instead. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's pale face, my father's clenched jaw, Emily's look of disbelief. I replayed Grandma's words over and over in my head. Strength doesn't mean silence. It felt like she was sitting beside me, hand on mine, steady as ever. By morning, I knew two things for certain. First, my family wasn't done fighting. And second, neither was I. The lawyer Grandma had mentioned was named Thomas Avery. His card was in the folder, tucked neatly behind the trust documents. I called his office as soon as they opened. When I said my name, there was a pause on the line. "We've been expecting you, Miss Brooks," he said gently. That sentence alone made my chest tighten. His office was downtown, all glass and steel, a far cry from Grandma's warm, cluttered home. As I sat across from him, the reality of what she'd done began to fully sink in. The trust was airtight. The house, the savings account, even a small investment portfolio I hadn't known existed. All of it protected, all of it mine to manage. "They can contest it," he said honestly, "but they won't win." I exhaled, a breath I felt like I'd been holding my entire life. "What do I do now?" I asked. "You decide," he replied. "That was your grandmother's intention." Deciding sounded simple. It wasn't. By the time I got back to my apartment, my phone was blowing up. Missed calls from my parents, from Emily, even from my aunt, who'd never called me unless she needed something. I ignored them all until a text came through from my mother. "You're tearing this family apart." I stared at the words, anger bubbling up beneath my ribs. No, I wasn't tearing anything apart. I was just refusing to hold it together by myself anymore. 2 days later, Emily showed up at my door. I knew it was her before I even opened it. She knocked the way she always had, confident, expectant, like she belonged everywhere. She looked different up close, tired. Her perfect hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes. For a split second, guilt flickered. Then I remembered the dining room, the way she'd brushed past me like I didn't matter. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't sit. She paced my small living room, taking it all in. The thrift store couch, the stack of books on the floor, my life stripped of the polish she'd always had. "I didn't know," she said finally, "about the trust." "That's interesting," I replied. "You seemed pretty confident Grandma wanted everything to go your way." She flinched. "Mom and Dad said—" "There it is. You listened to them, just like always." Her voice cracked. "I needed it, Claire." I crossed my arms. "You wanted it." "They're not the same thing," she snapped. I studied her, really studied her, and for the first time, I saw the cracks, the pressure, the fear. Being the golden child wasn't as shiny as it looked from the outside. "Do you know what Grandma told me once? That love isn't proven by what you're given, but what you're trusted with." Emily stopped pacing. I continued. "She trusted me, and that terrifies you." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but her chin lifted defensively. "So what now? You keep everything? Let Mom and Dad fall apart?" There it was, the manipulation wrapped in concern. "I didn't say that, but I won't be guilted into giving up what was never yours." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at me. "They're getting a lawyer." "I know," I said. She looked stunned. "How?" "Because Grandma planned for that too." Emily laughed bitterly. "You always were her favorite." The words stung more than I expected. "No," I said. "I was her responsibility." Emily left without another word. That evening, I went back to Grandma's house alone. I needed to feel grounded, to remember who I was before all of this. As I sorted through old photo albums, I found one tucked away at the bottom of a drawer. Inside were pictures I'd never seen. Grandma with a younger version of my mother, smiling. Then, later photos, the smiles tighter, more forced. A folded note slipped out. "Some patterns repeat until someone stops them." My phone rang. Thomas Avery. "We've filed a challenge, and there's something else you should know." My stomach dropped. "What?" I asked. "They're claiming Grandma wasn't mentally competent when she set up the trust." The accusation felt like a slap. "That's a lie," I said. "I know," he replied, "but it's about to get ugly." I sank into Grandma's old armchair, the weight of the fight ahead pressing down on me. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about legacy, truth, and whether I was finally ready to stand my ground when the people who raised me decided to become my enemies. And just as I thought things couldn't get worse, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. Emily's voice, shaking. "Claire, you need to call me now. Mom did something." My heart raced. Whatever she'd done, I knew one thing for sure. This battle was only beginning. I called Emily back immediately. She didn't answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. "Emily," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm even as my pulse hammered in my ears. "You can't say something like that and disappear. Call me back." I stared at my phone, waiting for it to ring. It didn't. The house felt suddenly too quiet. Grandma's armchair creaked as I stood up, the sound echoing through the living room like a warning. My mind raced through possibilities. My mother had always been calculated, but she wasn't reckless. or at least she hadn't been before she lost control. I grabbed my keys and drove. My parents' house was only 15 minutes away, but it felt longer. Every red light tightened the knot in my stomach. When I pulled into the driveway, Emily's car was there. So was a third one I didn't recognize. I walked in without knocking. My mother was crying at the kitchen table, full-body sobs, dramatic and loud. My father stood beside her, hand on her shoulder, his face grim. And sitting across from them was a woman in a gray blazer, a leather folder open in front of her. Emily looked up when she saw me, relief flooding her face for half a second, before it hardened into something else. Fear. "What's going on?" I demanded. The woman stood. "Claire Brooks?" "Yes. I'm Marianne Keller from Adult Protective Services." The room tilted. My mother let out a strangled sob. "She's confused," she cried. "My mother was confused. We didn't realize how bad it was until after she passed." I turned to her slowly. "What did you just say?" Marianne's tone was gentle but firm. "Your parents filed a report stating they believe your grandmother was suffering from cognitive decline when she made recent legal decisions, specifically decisions involving you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then anger surged so fast it scared me. "You accused her of being mentally unfit?" I said, "after everything she did for you?" My father stepped forward. "We had no choice. You left us no choice." "No," I snapped. "You chose this." Emily stood up. "Claire, please. Mom thought if the trust was frozen—" "You knew about this?" I asked, staring at her. Her silence was answer enough. Something inside me cracked then. Not loudly, quietly, like ice breaking under steady pressure. Marianne cleared her throat. "Miss Brooks, this doesn't mean the trust is invalid. It means we'll need to investigate. Interviews, medical records, character statements." "You're dragging her name through the mud," I said, my voice shaking. "She's not even here to defend herself." My mother looked up, eyes red. "She turned you against us." That was it. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was absurd. "She taught me to see clearly. That's not the same thing." Marianne closed her folder. "We'll be in touch." When she left, the house felt heavier, like the walls themselves were judging us. I turned to Emily. "You said Mom did something. Was this it?" She nodded, tears spilling over. "I didn't know how far she'd go." I looked at my mother. "You would rather destroy your own mother's memory than accept her decision?" "She humiliated us. She made us look like thieves." "You made yourselves look like that," I replied. I left before I said something unforgivable. Outside, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit in my car for a few minutes before I could drive. I called Thomas Avery. I told them APS. He exhaled slowly. "I suspected they might." "What happens now?" "We fight. And Claire, I'm going to need you to be very honest with me about your family." I swallowed. "You won't like what I have to say." "Truth usually isn't pretty," he replied. Over the next week, everything escalated. APS interviewed me, then neighbors, then old friends. They requested Grandma's medical records. Her doctor's notes were clear. Sharp mind, no diagnosis, no concerns. Every accusation my parents made began to unravel. Still, the stress was relentless. Emily stopped calling. My parents stopped pretending. One afternoon, I received an email from my father. Not emotional, not angry, cold. "If you proceed, we will cut you off completely. No family, no support. Think carefully." I stared at the message, my chest aching in a way that surprised me. Even after everything, part of me still wanted their approval, still wanted to be chosen. I forwarded it to Thomas. His response came quickly. "Save everything. Also, there's something you should see." He attached a document. It was a copy of an older will, one dated nearly 10 years back, before Grandma changed everything. In it, the inheritance was split evenly, house included. "What made her change it?" I asked when he called him. She added a codicil after an incident. What incident? He hesitated. Claire, your grandmother documented concerns about financial pressure from your parents and Emily. My stomach dropped. She believed they were manipulating her, he continued, asking for money, threatening distance, guilt. I closed my eyes. All those afternoons she'd insisted I stay for tea, all those conversations that felt casual but suddenly seemed intentional. She was protecting me, I whispered. Yes, and now so are you. That night, Emily showed up again. This time, she looked broken. They're blaming me, she said, collapsing onto my couch. They said if I'd just convinced you to share, none of this would have happened. I sat beside her, exhausted. And what do you think? She wiped her face. I think Grandma was right. The words felt like a small earthquake. Emily looked at me. I don't want their money anymore. I searched her face, trying to decide if this was growth or desperation. Then why are you here? I asked. She hesitated. Because there's something I haven't told you. My heart sank. What? I asked. She took a shaky breath. Before Grandma died, Mom made her sign something, not a will, something else. The room went silent. What did she sign? I whispered. Emily looked at me, eyes full of fear. I don't know, she said, but I think it's the reason Mom is so desperate now. My phone buzzed. A new message from my mother. You don't know the whole story. And suddenly, I realized the truth might be far more dangerous than the money ever was. I didn't reply to my mother's message. You don't know the whole story. Those words followed me into the night like a shadow I couldn't shake. I sat on my couch long after Emily left, the apartment dark except for the glow from my phone screen. My mind replayed her last sentence again and again. Before Grandma died, Mom made her sign something. Not a will, something else. The thought made my stomach twist. Growing up, my mother had always been careful. She never raised her voice unless she knew she'd win. She didn't force things openly. She nudged, pressured, wore people down slowly until they thought her idea was their own. If she had made Grandma sign something, it wouldn't have been loud or obvious. It would have been quiet, strategic, dangerous. I barely slept that night. Every time I drifted off, I dreamed of Grandma sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of her, my mother standing behind her with a hand on her shoulder that looked loving to anyone else, but felt heavy and wrong to me. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I went back to Grandma's house. The place was becoming a strange kind of anchor for me. Every time the world felt like it was spinning out of control, I ended up there, surrounded by her things, her order, her calm. I unlocked the door and stood in the entryway for a moment, breathing in deeply. I'm trying, I whispered to the empty house. I hope you know that. I went straight to her bedroom. The safe was still open, the folders exactly where I'd left them. I pulled everything out this time, not just the trust documents, but old bank statements, handwritten notes, even greeting cards she'd saved for years. That's when I noticed something odd. At the bottom of one folder was a thin manila envelope I hadn't seen before. No label, no name, just sealed. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single document, a power of attorney, dated 6 months before Grandma's death, granted to my mother. My chest tightened so hard it felt like I couldn't breathe. The document was legal, signed, witnessed. On the surface, everything looked clean, but I knew Grandma. She hated paperwork. She hated giving anyone control over her affairs. She'd said it 100 times. So why would she do this? I dropped into the chair beside the bed, the paper shaking in my hands. Suddenly, my mother's desperation made sense. If the trust stood, the power of attorney meant nothing. But if she could prove Grandma wasn't competent, then this document became a weapon. A memory surfaced then. one I hadn't thought about in years. It was last spring. Grandma had called me late at night, her voice unusually quiet. "Claire," she said, "if someone tells you I agreed to something that doesn't feel like me, promise me you won't believe it right away." I laughed softly, trying to lighten the mood. "You're sharper than all of us put together." She hadn't laughed back. "Just promise me," she'd said. I folded the document carefully and put it back in the envelope. This was the missing piece. I called Thomas Avery immediately. When I told him what I'd found, there was a long silence on the line. "That explains their strategy," he finally said. "The power of attorney gives your mother authority, but only if your grandmother was deemed incapable of managing her own affairs at the time." "So they're trying to rewrite history," I said. "Yes," he replied. "And Claire, if this was signed under pressure, that changes everything." "How do we prove that?" I asked. "We start with witnesses, anyone who was around her at the time." I knew exactly who that was. Later that afternoon, I visited Mrs. Donnelly, Grandma's neighbor of over 20 years. She was the kind of woman who noticed everything and forgot nothing. When I showed her the document, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Oh, I remember that week," she said. "Your mother was here every day." "What do you remember?" I asked. "She wasn't kind," Mrs. Donnelly bluntly said. "Not the way your grandmother needed. She kept talking about making things easier and putting things in order. Your grandma cried one afternoon after she left." My throat tightened. Did she seem confused? Mrs. Donnelly snorted. "Confused? No. Upset, yes. Angry, even. She told me she felt cornered." That word echoed in my head. Cornered. I left Mrs. Donnelly's house with my hands shaking, but this time it wasn't fear. It was clarity. On my way home, my phone rang. Emily. "I talked to Dad," she said quietly. "He says Mom only did what she had to." "Funny," I replied. "That's what people say when they know they crossed the line." Emily sighed. "They're scared, Claire." "So am I, but I didn't accuse a dead woman of losing her mind." There was a long pause. "I don't know whose side I'm on anymore," Emily admitted. I softened just a little. "That makes two of us." That evening, Thomas called again. "We've scheduled a hearing," he said. "They're pushing hard." "When?" I asked. "Soon," he replied. "And Claire, your mother has submitted an affidavit." My heart sank. "Saying what?" "Saying that your grandmother feared you were unstable after your divorce, that she signed the power of attorney to protect the family." I laughed bitterly. "So now I'm the problem." "I'm afraid so," he gently said. I ended the call and stared at the wall. All my life, I'd been the reliable one, the strong one, the one who didn't cause trouble. And now, to protect their version of the story, they were willing to paint me as unstable and Grandma as incapable. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. "We can still fix this. Come over tomorrow, alone." I knew it was a trap, but I also knew something else. If I was ever going to stop running from my family's manipulation, I would have to face it head on, even if it broke what little was left. The next morning, I woke with a mix of dread and determination. My mother's message echoed in my mind. "Come over tomorrow, alone." Alone. That was the catch. She wanted me isolated, vulnerable, without Emily or anyone to witness what might happen. But I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't the girl who let her family's whispers decide her worth. Grandma had taught me to observe, to wait, to read between the lines, and I would not walk into a trap blindly. I spent the morning gathering evidence. Notes from Grandma, letters she had kept for me, witness statements from Mrs. Donnelly. I even found emails my mother had sent to Grandma that, in hindsight, reeked of pressure disguised as concern. Each piece made my chest tighten. Every one of them painted a clear picture. This wasn't just about money. It was about control. By mid-afternoon, I drove to my parents' house. I parked a block away, just in case. My hands were steady, my mind sharp. I had a plan. I would listen, I would ask questions, and I would leave no room for lies. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She smiled, the kind of smile that used to lull me into compliance when I was younger. It felt off now, staged, forced. "Claire," she said softly, "come in." I stepped inside, careful to watch her hands, her movements. Nothing natural, nothing casual. "Alone, just like I asked," she said, closing the door behind me. I nodded. "You wanted alone, here I am." The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon. Grandma's old spice jars still lined the shelves. Everything about this house reminded me of the past, the safety, the control, the subtle ways my mother had always tried to manipulate it. She gestured toward the dining table. "Sit." I remained standing. "We can talk here," I said. She sighed. "Claire, I never wanted it to come to this." "Then why?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. "Why the affidavit? Why the lies about Grandma's health?" Her face faltered. For the first time in years, I saw real fear in my mother's eyes. Fear of exposure. Fear of losing the control she had always believed was her birthright. "You think you've won?" she whispered. "Even if they believe me at the hearing, you'll have nothing." I shook my head. Grandma already won. She trusted me, and that trust protects everything she cared about. You underestimated her. You underestimated me. There was a long silence. I could hear my own heartbeat in the quiet kitchen. Then my mother's voice broke again, softer this time, almost desperate. "Claire, what about Emily?" I froze. Emily. She had stayed out of this, trying to distance herself from the chaos, but my mother was using her as leverage, as always. "She's not your pawn," I said, "and she doesn't need your protection anymore. Let her decide for herself." My mother stared at me, searching for something. Approval? Compliance? Love? I didn't give her any of it. Suddenly, I heard a soft knock at the front door. My mother's eyes widened. She stood and went to answer it. I followed her quietly, heart pounding. Emily stepped inside, looking pale and tense. "Mom, I can't." Emily's voice trembled. "You shouldn't be here," my mother said, but Emily ignored her. "I came because I needed to see," Emily said, turning to me. "I needed to see if you were okay, if we could fix this." I studied her carefully. She looked like herself again, the real Emily, not the one molded by my parents' pressure. I took a deep breath. "There's nothing to fix. The truth is already here. Grandma planned everything. She trusted me, and now you do too, if you want to." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I do," she whispered. I reached out my hand. For the first time in years, we didn't need my parents' permission to connect. She took it, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But my mother stood there, trembling, realizing she had lost both of us. "You don't understand," she said weakly. "I understand more than you ever realized," I replied. As Emily and I left the house, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "You think you're done. You're not." I froze. My stomach turned. Whoever sent that message knew more than I thought. And I realized in that moment that even with Grandma's trust and the legal documents, the battle wasn't over. Not yet. Because some secrets were bigger than money, and some betrayals ran deeper than family. The text haunted me all night. "You think you're done. You're not." I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's pleading face, Emily's fearful eyes, and Grandma's calm, knowing gaze. But more than that, I felt the weight of what was coming. Whoever sent that message knew my next moves, knew the cracks in my family, maybe even knew Grandma's secrets better than I did. By morning, I decided to confront it head on. Fear wouldn't guide me this time. I was done running. I called Thomas Avery and laid everything out: the affidavit, the power of attorney, Emily's confession, and the mysterious text. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Claire, this isn't just a family fight anymore. Someone is trying to intimidate you, and they're willing to go far." I felt the familiar knot in my stomach tighten. How far? "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I suggest we prepare for everything." That afternoon, I went back to Grandma's house. It had become my fortress, a place of clarity amidst chaos. I spread all the documents across the dining table: Grandma's original will, the trust paperwork, letters, photographs, witness statements. I needed to see the whole picture before the next battle. Emily arrived shortly after. She didn't knock, she just opened the door, as if she'd been invited into my world now. "I don't know what I can do," she said quietly, sitting at the kitchen table. "I feel like I should help, but I don't know how." "Being here helps," I told her. "Just knowing you see the truth, that's enough for now." We went through everything together. Emily's perspective helped me see parts of the puzzle I'd missed: the subtle ways my parents had manipulated both of us, the small lies that added up over the years, the moments Grandma had shielded me from them without me realizing. Then we found it: a letter from Grandma, dated just weeks before her death, tucked behind the folder containing the power of attorney. Her handwriting was deliberate, steady, the kind that demanded attention. "If they try to undermine me, Claire, you must remember, strength is not measured by anger, but by patience, intelligence, and courage. Protect what is yours, protect yourself, protect the family that deserves to be protected." Emily looked up from the letter. She really thought of everything. She did. And now we have to finish what she started. We worked late into the night, organizing documents, creating timelines, mapping out witness testimonies. I realized something profound. Grandma hadn't just left us money, she had left us a roadmap, a way to expose the manipulation, the lies, and reclaim control over a family that had tried to suffocate me. When we finally paused, exhaustion weighing on our shoulders, Emily looked at me, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I could ever forgive Mom or Dad." "I don't know either," I admitted. "But forgiveness isn't the point right now. Survival is, truth is, boundaries are." Just as we were about to leave Grandma's house, my phone buzzed again. Another text: "You think you've won? Think again." I stared at the message. My hands shook. Whoever this was, they weren't done. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about money or power or control. This was about legacy, and I was finally ready to claim mine. I turned to Emily. "Are you ready?" She nodded, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. Because what was coming next wouldn't just test our courage, it would define the rest of our lives. The next morning, the air in the city felt heavy, like it knew something was about to happen. Emily and I met at Grandma's house, each of us carrying the folders, letters, and evidence we'd painstakingly organized. This wasn't just preparation for a legal battle anymore. It was preparation for a reckoning. Thomas Avery met us there, calm and collected as always. "Today is the hearing," he said. "This is where we present the truth." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I thought about Grandma, about her wisdom, about all the nights she had guided me quietly. Strength is not measured by anger, but by patience, intelligence, and courage. I clutched that thought like a talisman. The courtroom was intimidating. Every polished wood surface and leather chair a silent reminder of authority. My parents were already there, flanked by their lawyer, looking self-assured. Emily's hand found mine under the table, squeezing it. That small gesture angered me more than any document ever could. The proceedings began. My mother's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of my grandmother's supposed decline, using the power of attorney to suggest that my inheritance had been manipulated. The air in the courtroom grew tense, and I felt my chest tighten, the weight of years of betrayal pressing down on me. Then it was our turn. Thomas presented everything: Grandma's original will, the trust documents, the witness statements, the letters she had left behind. Each piece reinforced the same message: Grandma was lucid, decisive, and in control. The moment I watched Mrs. Donnelly testify, confirming my mother's pressure tactics, I felt something inside me shift. Confidence, validation, a sense that justice was not only possible, but inevitable. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, letting my voice fill the room. My grandmother was a wise woman. She saw clearly who we were, what we valued, and what we tried to hide. She trusted me with her legacy because she knew I would honor her wishes, not because she was her favorite, but because I was capable of seeing the truth and acting with integrity. I looked at my parents. They avoided my gaze. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't begging. I was standing, finally, fully, unapologetically. She left me a roadmap, a way to protect her decisions, her property, and the family she cared about. This isn't about money. This is about integrity and about respecting a woman who spent her life teaching us how to be better than our impulses, better than our greed, better than ourselves. There was a silence that felt eternal. Then the judge nodded. He understood. The truth was clear, undeniable. The verdict came swiftly. The trust was upheld. The power of attorney was irrelevant. Grandma's instructions would be followed exactly as she planned. I felt the tension leave my body in a rush, tears pricking my eyes. Emily squeezed my hand, silent support passing between us. After court, we walked out into the winter sunlight, a chill in the air but warmth in our hearts. Emily looked at me with tears she didn't try to hide. "You were amazing," she said softly. "No, Grandma was amazing, and she gave me the courage to be like her." We didn't speak of my parents on the walk home. We didn't need to. I realized something profound that day. Some people will never change. Some betrayals are so deep they leave scars. But there is power in boundaries, in choosing who you let influence your life, and in honoring those who truly loved and trusted you. That evening, I went back to Grandma's house one last time. I stood in her kitchen, breathing in the familiar scents, touching the worn countertops, and letting myself feel the peace that had eluded me for so long. I placed the folders carefully in a locked cabinet, her legacy finally secure, my life finally mine. For the first time in years, I felt whole, strong, free. And as I looked out the window at the city below, I whispered softly, "Thank you, Grandma. I won't forget, and I will never be silent again." Later, I called Emily. I said, "Let's take a trip, somewhere far away from all of this. We've earned it." She laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound. "I'd like that." That night, I sat on my balcony looking at the stars. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulations, they hadn't destroyed me. They had shaped me. And for the first time, I knew that my life was guided not by the control of others, but by the choices I made, the boundaries I set, and the courage to claim my own story. Because some people will try to take your inheritance, your peace, or your dignity, but no one, not even family, can take what you've been entrusted to protect if you are brave enough to stand for it. And for anyone watching, wondering if the truth can ever triumph over deception, it can, if you have the courage to hold on, to act, and to trust yourself. Have you ever had to fight for what was rightfully yours, even against the people who were supposed to love you most? Share your story in the comments below.